The Galactic Empire wanted Earth's moon. The human fleet was already waiting there. Far beyond the edge of known space, in a place where stars grew thin and cold, the great warships of the Cauldron Empire moved through the dark like silent predators. They had crossed 1,000 light-years to reach this small, unremarkable system on the edge of the galaxy. Their target was a pale yellow star, with 8 planets, and one of those planets had a moon that the Empire wanted very badly. The fleet commander was a tall being named Vos Adron. He had gray skin, sharp eyes, and the calm confidence of someone who had conquered dozens of worlds before. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Reach, and looked at the holographic display floating in front of him. The display showed the star system they called Sol, and the small blue-green world the locals called Earth. "Report," Vos said, his voice deep and unhurried. A young officer named Tessic stepped forward. He was nervous, as most young officers were around Vos. "Commander, our long-range scans show no significant military presence in this system. The third planet has a large population of primitive humanoids. Their technology is limited to chemical rockets and basic orbital satellites. We detected no warships, no defense platforms, and no signs of advanced weaponry." Vos nodded slowly. This matched what the Empire's scouts had reported months earlier. It was one of the reasons this mission had been approved so quickly. The Empire needed new territory. Their border wars with the Skarn Collective had drained their resources, and their engineers had grown desperate for fresh sources of rare minerals. The moon of this system, called Luna by the locals, was rich in helium-3 and other valuable elements. It was also positioned perfectly to become a forward base, a place where the Empire could build shipyards and refueling stations for future expansion into this quiet corner of the galaxy. "And the moon itself?" Vos asked. "Empty, Commander. No colonies, no bases, no defenses of any kind. The humans have sent a handful of small probes there over the centuries, but nothing more. It should be a simple matter to claim it." Vos allowed himself a small smile. Simple conquests were rare these days. Most worlds worth taking already belonged to someone, and taking them meant war. But this moon belonged to no one, at least not officially. The humans had never built anything there. They had never claimed it under any galactic law, because as far as the Empire's records showed, humanity did not even know galactic law existed. This was a world that had never been contacted by anyone, a world still alone in the dark, unaware that a much larger universe existed beyond its sky. "Then we will take it peacefully, if possible," Vos said. "Send a message to the primary Cauldron Command Exarch when we arrive. Tell them the operation proceeds as planned. We will make orbit around the moon within the hour." The fleet moved forward. 6 warships in total, sleek and dark, their hulls covered in defensive plating that had withstood weapons far more powerful than anything a primitive species could build. Behind them came 2 supply ships and 1 large construction vessel, filled with automated machines, meant to begin building the new base the moment the fleet secured the area. Vos had commanded fleets before, in real wars, against real enemies. This mission felt almost like a vacation. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the approaching planet and its moon. Earth looked peaceful from this distance, wrapped in white clouds, its oceans reflecting the light of its sun. He wondered briefly what the locals looked like, what they ate, what they believed about the universe before today. It did not matter much. History showed that most primitive species reacted to first contact in one of 2 ways. Some were amazed and grateful for the chance to join a larger civilization. Others panicked and had to be shown, through careful demonstration, that resistance served no purpose. Either way, the outcome for the Empire was the same. The fleet crossed the outer edge of the system, passing far beyond the gas giants, moving steadily inward toward the pale blue world and its silver moon. Tessic checked his instruments again, more out of habit than worry. Then he frowned. "Commander," he said, "I am seeing something strange." Vos turned from the viewport. "Strange how?" "Our sensors detected a brief energy fluctuation near the far side of the moon. It lasted less than a second." "It could be nothing. A sensor error. Perhaps some kind of natural phenomenon. Run a full diagnostic," Vos ordered. "I want a clean picture before we commit the fleet to orbit." Tessic obeyed, his fingers moving quickly over his console. The bridge crew watched in silence as the diagnostic ran. A minute passed, then 2. The silence stretched, and Vos felt the first small itch of unease. though he did not let it show on his face. In his long career, sudden and unexplained energy readings rarely meant nothing. "Diagnostic complete, Commander," Tessic said. "Sensors are functioning normally. The energy fluctuation was real. It appears to have originated from the far side of the moon, in the region we cannot observe directly from our current position. Show me the location on the display." A small red marker appeared on the holographic image of the moon, near its southern pole, on the side that never faced Earth directly. "Increase magnification," Voss said, "and bring the fleet's forward sensor array to full power. I want to know what is on that surface before we get any closer." The fleet continued its approach while the sensor teams worked. Voss remained standing at the viewport, watching the moon grow larger and larger in the darkness. It looked exactly as the scouting reports had described: gray, cratered, silent. A dead world with nothing on it worth noticing, except for what lay beneath its surface in valuable minerals. "Commander," Tessic said again, his voice tighter now, "we are picking up more readings. Multiple small energy signatures, all clustered near the same region on the far side. They match the profile of—" He paused, checking his instruments once more, as if he did not trust what he was seeing. "They match the profile of active starship engines, Commander, but the size and configuration do not match anything in our database." Voss walked quickly to the sensor station and looked over Tessic's shoulder at the raw data. The readings were faint but unmistakable now. Dozens of small energy sources, humming quietly on the far side of the moon, hidden from view of Earth and, until a moment ago, hidden from the approaching Cauldron fleet as well. Could this be a natural phenomenon? Voss asked, though he already suspected the answer. "No, Commander. The energy patterns are too regular, too structured. This is technology. Someone has built something on that moon, and it has been powered down, or shielded until now." Voss felt the itch of unease grow sharper. He thought of the scouting reports again, the ones that said this system held no advanced civilization, no defenses, nothing worth worrying about. Those reports had been gathered from a distance, using long-range sensors that could easily be fooled by careful concealment. It was a mistake the Empire had made before, though rarely against a species supposedly this primitive. "Bring the fleet to a defensive formation," Voss ordered, his voice sharper now. "Slow our approach. I want full sensor sweeps of that region, and I want communications ready to hail whatever is out there." The bridge crew moved quickly to obey. The great warships shifted their formation, spreading apart into a wider pattern that gave them better firing angles in case of trouble. Voss watched the moon grow closer, his earlier confidence fading into something more careful, more alert. Then the far side of the moon lit up. It happened all at once. What had looked like empty gray rock and shadow suddenly bloomed with light, dozens of hidden hangar doors sliding open along craters and ridges that had clearly been carved and shaped by intelligent hands. Ships began to rise from the surface, sleek and dark, their designs unlike anything in the Empire's records. They moved with a discipline that spoke of long practice, forming into ranks with a speed that surprised even Voss, who had seen many fleets assemble for battle. "Commander." Tessic's voice cracked with alarm. I am reading over 200 vessels, Commander. Their engine signatures suggest they are combat capable. This is not a research station or a mining colony. This is a military fleet." Voss stared at the display, his mind racing to understand what he was seeing. 200 ships, hidden on the dark side of an unclaimed moon, in a system that Imperial scouts had judged too primitive to pose any threat. It made no sense, and yet the evidence floated right in front of him, in cold, undeniable light. "How is this possible?" he muttered, more to himself than to his crew. "Our scouts reported nothing, no industry capable of producing this, no orbital shipyards, no visible construction. How did they build all of this without us knowing?" No one on the bridge had an answer. The humans, it seemed, had kept an enormous secret hidden in plain sight, tucked away on the far side of their own moon, where no one from Earth could easily see it, and where distant Imperial scouts, looking only at surface conditions and broad energy patterns from far away, had somehow missed it entirely. A new signal appeared on the communications display, requesting to open a channel. Voss looked at it for a long moment. Every instinct told him to retreat, to pull his fleet back to a safer distance and reassess. But retreating now, in full view of this unknown fleet, might look like weakness, and weakness invited attack. He straightened his shoulders and gave the order. "Open the channel." The display flickered, and a human face appeared. It was an older woman, with silver hair pulled back tightly, her eyes calm and steady, wearing a dark uniform with unfamiliar insignia on the collar. Behind her, Voss could see the interior of a command bridge that looked surprisingly advanced, filled with screens and quiet, focused officers. "This is Fleet Admiral Naomi Reyes of the Earth Defense Fleet," the woman said. Her voice was calm, almost polite, though there was something firm underneath it, like steel wrapped in velvet. "You have entered Earth's home system without invitation or declaration. State your intentions." Voss studied her for a moment before responding. Her calmness bothered him more than aggression would have. Aggression was expected from primitive species facing a superior force. Calm confidence suggested something else entirely, something the scouting reports had completely failed to predict. "I am Fleet Commander Voss Adron of the Caldron Empire," he said, choosing his words carefully. "We have come to establish a peaceful research and mining outpost on your moon, in accordance with galactic settlement law regarding unclaimed celestial bodies. We mean no harm to your world." Naomi's expression did not change. "Our moon is not unclaimed, Commander Voss. It has been under Earth Defense Fleet protection for the past 30 years. I would ask you to consult more recent charts before making that particular argument again." Voss felt a chill run through him that had nothing to do with the cold of deep space. 30 years. If this was true, if humanity had secretly built and maintained a fleet of this size for 3 decades, without the wider galaxy noticing, then everything the Empire believed about this system, about this species, was wrong. Terribly, dangerously wrong. "I was not aware of any such claim," Voss said carefully. "Our records show no contact between your species and the wider galactic community." "That is because we chose not to make contact," Naomi replied simply. "Not until we were ready." "It seems your Empire arrived a bit early to that conversation, Commander." Behind Voss, he could hear the murmurs of his own bridge crew, quiet and uncertain. He understood their unease because he shared it. Everything about this situation defied what the Empire's intelligence had promised. A quiet, primitive world had somehow built a hidden fleet of over 200 warships, kept it secret from every scout and every long-range scan the Empire had ever run, and now stood ready to respond to an invasion that Voss had believed, only minutes earlier, would be nothing more than a formality. "What do you propose, Admiral?" Voss asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. "I propose you take your fleet, return to whatever border you came from, and inform your Empire that Earth and its moon are not available for annexation," Naomi said. "We have no wish for a fight today, but we are entirely prepared for one, should you insist on staying." Voss looked past her image, at the display showing the 200 human warships, now spread in a wide, disciplined formation, between his fleet and the moon's surface. He thought of his orders, of the Empire's need for the resources buried beneath that gray rock, of the shame that would follow if he simply turned and fled from a species everyone back home still believed to be primitive and helpless. But he also thought of his crew, of the 6 warships under his command, vastly outnumbered by a fleet whose true capabilities remained completely unknown to him. Overconfidence had ended more Imperial campaigns than any enemy weapon ever had. "Give me a moment to consult with my command staff, Admiral," Voss said. "Take your time, Commander," Naomi replied, and for the first time, something like a small, knowing smile crossed her face. "We are not going anywhere. We have been waiting a very long time for this conversation." The channel closed, and Voss stood in silence on his bridge, staring at the image of the human fleet, arrayed before him like a silent wall between his ships and the moon he had been so certain would be an easy prize. Somewhere far behind him, across 1,000 light-years of empty space, his superiors in the Caldron Empire had no idea that the quiet, primitive world they had sent him to claim had been waiting, patiently and quietly, for exactly this moment. Voss turned to Tessic, his voice low. "Send word back to Imperial Command. Tell them the situation has changed. Tell them humanity is not what our reports claimed." As he said the words, Voss could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger, a mistake the Empire would spend a very long time trying to understand, and perhaps an even longer time trying to correct. Voss Adron stood on the bridge of the Dominion's Reach, with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the frozen image of the human fleet spread out before the moon. 200 ships. Disciplined formation. Weapons ready, but not raised. It was the posture of a force that expected trouble but did not want to start it. That, more than anything, told Voss this was not a bluff. "Commander," said Tessic from the sensor station, "long-range scans of their ships show hull compositions we do not recognize. Their armor plating is denser than anything in our database, and their engine cores are putting out power levels far beyond what a species at their supposed technological stage should be capable of producing."
"How far beyond?"
Voss asked. Tessic hesitated. "Possibly comparable to our own, Commander. In some readings, perhaps greater." The words hung in the air like a slow poison. Voss had led fleets against the Skarn Collective, against pirate consortiums, against 3 separate rebellious colonies over the course of his long career. He had never once faced a fleet whose technology matched or exceeded his own, while flying under a flag his empire had never heard of. He turned to his second-in-command, a broad-shouldered officer named Graal Ferenth, who had said little since the human fleet appeared. "Your thoughts, Graal?" Graal's ears twitched, a sign of discomfort among his people. "My thoughts, Commander, are that our scouting reports were either badly outdated or deliberately falsified. There is no natural explanation for a civilization to hide a fleet of this size and quality from every long-range sensor sweep the Empire has run over the past decade. Someone either made a grave error, or humanity found a way to make us see only what they wanted us to see." Voss considered this. He remembered the scouting reports clearly, filled with images of simple farms, crowded cities, chemical rockets launching from dusty pads. All true, probably, but perhaps that was exactly the point. Perhaps the humans had allowed the Empire to see the parts of their world that looked harmless, while hiding the parts that did not. "Open a private channel to Admiral Reyes," Voss said. "I wish to speak with her again, without an audience." A moment later, Naomi Reyes's face appeared once more on the display, calm as before, though now, Voss noticed the faint lines around her eyes, the look of someone who had spent many years carrying a heavy weight quietly. "Commander Voss," she said, "have you reached a decision?" "Not yet, Admiral. I find myself curious about something, if you will indulge me." "Ask your question. How long have you been preparing for this moment?" 30 years, you said. That is a very long time to keep such a secret from the rest of your own people, let alone from the wider galaxy." Naomi was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. 31 years ago, a different ship came through this system. Smaller than yours, badly damaged, drifting on the edge of our solar system with barely enough power to keep its crew alive. It was not looking for conquest. It was fleeing from something much worse than your empire, Commander. A raiding fleet from beyond the outer rim, the kind that does not ask for surrender before it opens fire. Voss frowned. He had heard rumors of such raiders in his years of service, violent bands that struck fast and vanished before any organized response could reach them. Most Imperial commanders considered them myths told to frighten new recruits. "The ship that came to us was a scouting vessel from a civilization called the Ophirans," Naomi continued. "They had been fighting these raiders for generations, and were losing badly. When we found their ship and brought its surviving crew to Earth, they were desperate and grateful and willing to share what they knew in exchange for shelter. We gave them a place to rebuild, quietly, away from the eyes of our own governments who might have panicked or tried to seize their technology for selfish purposes. In return, they taught us how to build what we have today." Voss absorbed this slowly. It explained a great deal. A dying alien crew, technology far beyond human science, and 30 years of careful, secretive work, hidden on the far side of a moon that no government on Earth had ever officially claimed as anything more than a scientific curiosity. "And your own people know nothing of this?" Voss asked. "A few do. Enough to keep the project funded and protected. Most of humanity still looks up at the night sky and sees only stars, unaware that an empire like yours even exists, or that a fleet like this one stands quietly guarding them. We built this in secret because we understood, better than most, how dangerous first contact could be for a species not ready for it. The Ophiran survivors taught us that lesson themselves, through their own scars." Voss looked past her image again at the assembled human fleet. He thought of what it must have taken. 30 years of quiet labor, hidden shipyards, careful secrecy, all built from the wreckage of a single desperate alien ship that had crossed their path by chance. It was either the greatest stroke of luck any species had ever received, or proof that this species possessed a discipline and patience that the Empire had badly underestimated. "Why tell me this, Admiral?" Voss asked. "You could have simply ordered me to leave without any explanation." "Because I would prefer this end without violence, Commander," Naomi said, "and because I suspect you are a reasonable being who did not choose this mission out of malice, but out of duty to an empire that gave you incomplete information. I am giving you the chance to make a better choice than the one your superiors expected you to make." Voss said nothing for a long moment, weighing her words. Around him, his bridge crew waited in tense silence, unsure what their commander would decide. "I require time to consult with my command staff, Admiral," Voss said finally. "I will contact you again within the hour." "I will be here, Commander." The channel closed, and Voss turned to his officers. "Gather the senior staff in the strategy room. We need to discuss our options, and we need to discuss them honestly, without the assumptions we brought with us into this system." The senior staff meeting took place in a small, dimly lit room near the center of the ship, shielded from outside interference. Around the table sat Gral Ferenth, Tessic, the fleet's chief engineer Merrick Dovos, and the mission's political liaison, a sharp-eyed administrator named Corvain Thessaly, who represented the interests of the Cauldron Senate back on the Imperial homeworld. "Let us be clear about our situation," Voss began. "We came here expecting an easy annexation of an unclaimed resource. Instead, we find a hidden fleet of over 200 vessels, built with technology possibly superior to our own, guarding a system that we now understand to be neither undefended nor unclaimed. I want honest assessments." "Merrick, what does our engineering data show?" Merrick activated a small holographic display showing technical readouts gathered during the approach. "Their hull plating uses a molecular lattice structure we have only theorized about in our own research labs, Commander. If their weapons are proportional to their armor, we would need our full fleet, not just these 6 ships, to stand any real chance in an extended engagement. And even then, the outcome would be far from certain." Corvain Thessaly leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the table. "The Senate will not be pleased to hear that a supposedly primitive world has bested our scouting efforts so completely. However, I would remind everyone at this table that our orders were clear. We are to secure this moon for the Empire's use, by negotiation if possible, by force if necessary." "Those orders were given based on false information," Gral said sharply. "No sane commander sends 6 ships against 200 with confidence of victory, especially not when the technology of the defenders remains largely unknown to us." "The Senate does not deal in sanity, Officer Ferenth," Corvain replied coolly. "The Senate deals in results, returning empty-handed, having been chased off by a species we do not even list in our official records, would be seen as a humiliation the Empire cannot easily absorb, especially with the Skarn Collective watching our borders for any sign of weakness." Voss listened to the argument without interrupting, his mind working through the possibilities. Corvain was not wrong about the political danger of retreat, but Gral was not wrong either about the military danger of pressing forward against an enemy fleet of unknown but clearly formidable strength. "There is a third option," Voss said finally, and the room quieted to hear him. "We do not attack, and we do not simply retreat in shame. We negotiate a formal withdrawal, framed not as a defeat, but as the opening move in a diplomatic relationship. If this species truly possesses technology comparable to our own, then treating them as an enemy today may cost the Empire dearly in the future. Treating them as a potential ally, even a difficult one, may serve us better in the long run." Corvain frowned, clearly unconvinced. "The Senate values strength, Commander, not diplomacy with unknown primitives." "They are not primitives," Voss said firmly. "That much is now obvious, and the Senate values results above all else, as you yourself just said. A costly and possibly disastrous military defeat delivers no results at all, except perhaps to embolden the Skarn Collective further, when word inevitably spreads. A carefully negotiated withdrawal, framed as the first step toward future dealings with a newly discovered advanced civilization, could be presented very differently." The room fell silent as the officers considered this. Finally, Gral nodded slowly. "It is the wiser path, Commander. I support it." Merrick added, "Given what we now know of their technology, I would strongly advise against any direct confrontation until we understand their true capabilities far better than we do now. Corvain remained silent for a long moment, clearly weighing the political risks against the alternative of leading 6 damaged or destroyed ships back to Imperial space. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Very well, Commander. I will support this course of action, on the condition that our official reports frame this properly, as a strategic decision rather than a retreat." "Agreed," Voss said. He turned back to the main display and opened the channel once more. Naomi Reyes appeared, her expression patient. "You have reached a decision, Commander." "We have, Admiral. My fleet will withdraw from your system's inner boundary. However, I wish to propose something before we depart. A formal exchange of information between our 2 civilizations, conducted through proper diplomatic channels, so that future contact between our peoples does not begin under the shadow of a misunderstanding such as this one." Naomi studied him for a long moment, and something in her expression softened slightly, the wariness easing just a fraction. "That is a wiser proposal than I expected, Commander Voss. I will bring it before our planetary council. I cannot promise how they will respond, given how carefully we have guarded our secrecy until now, but I will make the case for it myself." "That is all I can ask, Admiral," Voss said. "One more thing, Commander," Naomi added. "Before you go, understand this clearly. What you saw here today was only a portion of what we have built. We did not show you everything, and we do not intend to, not yet. Consider that when you report back to your empire." Voss felt a chill at her words, understanding immediately the weight behind them. 200 ships had been more than enough to convince him to withdraw peacefully. The idea that this was only a portion of humanity's true strength sent a fresh wave of unease through him, one he suspected would follow him for the rest of his career. "I will remember that, Admiral," he said quietly. The channel closed, and Voss ordered the fleet to begin its slow, careful withdrawal from the system. As the ships turned away from the moon and the pale blue world beyond it, Voss stood at the viewport once more, watching Earth shrink behind them. He thought of the report he would have to file, the questions that would follow from the Senate, and the uncomfortable truth that the Cauldron Empire, which had believed itself to be one of the dominant powers of this region of the galaxy, had just discovered a species capable of hiding an entire war fleet in plain sight for 3 decades without detection. Somewhere behind him, hidden among the craters of that silver moon, Naomi Reyes and her defense fleet remained in position, watching the Cauldron ships depart, already preparing reports of their own for the quiet council of leaders who had guided humanity's secret preparation for this exact moment. Neither side knew yet how this first contact would shape the years to come, but both understood, in that quiet moment of mutual retreat, that the galaxy had just become a much more complicated place than either had believed that morning. 3 months passed after Commander Voss Adron's fleet withdrew from the Sol system, and in that time, word of the encounter spread quietly through certain channels of the Cauldron Empire, not officially, of course. Corvain Thessaly had made certain the formal reports described a strategic withdrawal following the discovery of an advanced, previously uncatalogued civilization. But rumors traveled faster than official reports, and soon enough, whispers reached ears far beyond the Senate chambers. One pair of ears belonged to Grand Marshal Kasari Vaughn, commander of the 3rd Imperial Battle Fleet, a woman whose reputation for ruthlessness had been earned across 4 decades of border conflicts. She did not believe in primitive species suddenly possessing advanced fleets. She believed in incompetence, cowardice, and commanders who invented excuses for failure. She requested, and received, permission to lead a second expedition to the Sol system. Her fleet was twice the size of Voss's, 12 warships instead of 6, backed by 3 heavy cruisers capable of orbital bombardment. She did not intend to repeat what she saw as Voss's mistake. She intended to arrive with enough force that no negotiation would be necessary. Meanwhile, on Earth, the quiet council that oversaw the defense fleet's operations met in a secure chamber deep beneath a mountain range, far from any city. Admiral Naomi Reyes stood before a long table where a dozen serious faces watched a display showing the latest sensor data from deep space monitoring stations scattered throughout the outer solar system. "They are coming back," Naomi said simply. "A larger fleet this time. 12 warships, 3 heavy cruisers. Our monitoring stations picked them up entering the system's outer boundary 6 hours ago." A gray-haired man near the head of the table, Director Elias Marsh, rubbed his tired eyes. We expected this might happen. Voss Adron's diplomatic proposal clearly did not convince everyone within their command structure. It appears not, Naomi said. This new commander, Grand Marshal Kasari Vaughn, according to our intercepted communications, is approaching with far more aggressive posture. Weapons are active. There has been no attempt at communication. What do you recommend, Admiral? Asked another council member, a woman named Priya Anand, who oversaw civilian intelligence gathering. I recommend we do exactly what we did before, but with a clearer demonstration this time, Naomi said. Commander Voss withdrew peacefully after seeing our numbers. This new commander seems determined to test our resolve directly. I believe a show of capability, controlled and limited, will discourage further aggression more effectively than words alone. Director Marsh considered this carefully. You are suggesting we reveal more of our actual strength. A small portion of it, yes, Naomi said. Enough to make clear that our numbers were not the limit of what we can do. I do not wish for this to become a battle, Director, but I believe a demonstration now may prevent a much larger conflict later. The council debated for nearly an hour, weighing the risks of revealing too much against the dangers of appearing weak. Finally, Director Marsh nodded. Proceed with your plan, Admiral, but exercise restraint. We do not want this to become the spark that starts a war we are not fully ready to fight. Understood, Director, Naomi said. 18 hours later, Grand Marshal Kasari Vaughn's fleet crossed into the inner solar system, moving with confident, unhurried precision. Kasari stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Imperial Wrath, watching the approach with cold, calculating patience. Report on defensive presence, she ordered. Her sensor officer, a nervous young man named Dresk, checked his readings carefully before responding. Grand Marshal, we are detecting the same fleet formation reported by Commander Voss. Approximately 200 vessels stationed around the moon of the third planet. Only 200, Kasari said with a thin smile. Commander Voss brought 6 ships against 200, and chose to retreat. I have brought 12 warships and 3 heavy cruisers. The mathematics favor us considerably better this time, even against an unknown enemy. Grand Marshal, our scans still cannot fully penetrate their hull composition or determine their weapon capabilities, Dresk said carefully. We remain uncertain of their true strength. Uncertainty is not the same as weakness, Dresk, Kasari replied, but it is also not the same as strength. We will proceed to the moon's orbital boundary and demand their immediate withdrawal. If they refuse, we will demonstrate the cost of defying the Cauldron Empire. The fleet continued its approach, and soon enough, the same silver moon that Voss had seen months earlier grew large in their viewports. As before, the human fleet waited in disciplined formation, ships spread wide, weapons ready but not raised. Kasari opened a communication channel herself this time, her expression hard and unyielding. Naomi Reyes appeared on the display, calm as always. Admiral Reyes, I presume, Kasari said. I am Grand Marshal Kasari Vaughn. I am aware of your encounter with Commander Voss Adron. I am not Commander Voss. I have not come to negotiate. I have come to inform you that this moon will become Cauldron territory, effective immediately. Withdraw your vessels, or face the consequences of your defiance. Naomi's expression did not change, though something in her eyes hardened slightly. Grand Marshal, Commander Voss chose wisely when he withdrew his fleet after seeing what we have here. I would advise you to consider his judgment rather than dismiss it. Commander Voss chose weakness, Kasari said flatly. I do not. Then let me offer you a small demonstration, so that your choice today is an informed one, Naomi said, rather than one built on assumptions that may cost your fleet dearly. Kasari's confidence flickered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. Proceed with your demonstration, Admiral. I doubt it will change my calculations. Naomi gave a quiet nod to someone off-screen, and a moment later, a single human ship detached itself from the main formation. It was smaller than the others, sleek and fast, moving with a grace that seemed almost unnatural for a vessel of its size. It approached the edge of the Cauldron formation, close enough to be seen clearly by every ship in Kasari's fleet, but not so close as to appear threatening. Then, without warning, the small ship fired a single beam of concentrated energy at a large asteroid drifting nearby. one that had been tracked by both fleets as debris left over from the system's formation billions of years earlier. The beam struck the asteroid, easily twice the size of Kasari's flagship, and the rock shattered into fine dust in less than 2 seconds, the fragments scattering harmlessly into the void. Silence fell across the bridge of the Imperial Wrath. Kasari stared at the display, her jaw tight. "Grand Marshal," Dresk said quietly, "our sensors indicate that weapon output was considerably beyond anything catalogued in our current database. If that ship, one of their smallest vessels, possesses that kind of firepower, the rest of their fleet may be equipped similarly, or worse." Kasari said nothing for a long moment, her mind working through the implications. A single small vessel had just destroyed a target the size of a small moon fragment with a single shot, using a weapon type her own analysts could not immediately classify. Naomi's voice came through the channel again, calm and measured. "That was one of our smaller patrol vessels, Grand Marshal. I show you this, not as a threat, but as an honest picture of what stands between your fleet and this moon. I would prefer this conversation end peacefully, as it did with Commander Voss, but the choice remains yours." Kasari's pride burned at the implied challenge, but the cold logic of command experience told her something else entirely. 12 ships and 3 cruisers, no matter how well armed by Imperial standards, meant little against an enemy capable of firepower like what she had just witnessed, especially when that enemy fielded 200 vessels of unknown but clearly formidable individual strength. "Grand Marshal," Dresk added, his voice tight with barely concealed alarm, "I am also detecting additional energy signatures emerging from the far side of the moon. It appears their full fleet may not have been fully deployed even during this encounter." Kasari's hands tightened into fists at her sides. She had come here seeking to prove that Voss Adron had been a coward, that a stronger commander, with a larger fleet, would have secured this moon without hesitation. Instead, she found herself facing the exact same choice he had faced, now made even more urgent by the demonstration she had just witnessed. She thought of her reputation, built over 4 decades of victories against enemies who, in hindsight, had never possessed anything close to this level of technology. She thought of the Senate's expectations, and the shame that would follow a second failed attempt to secure this small, valuable moon. But she also thought of her crew, of the thousands of Caldron lives aboard her 15 ships, lives that would be spent for nothing if she chose pride over wisdom. "Admiral Reyes," Kasari said finally, her voice tight but controlled, "I require time to consult with my command staff." "Take the time you need, Grand Marshal," Naomi said. "We are not going anywhere." The channel closed, and Kasari turned to her bridge crew, her expression unreadable. "Gather the senior officers. We have a decision to make, and I suspect it will not be the one I came here intending to deliver." As the officers moved to obey, Kasari looked once more at the display showing the shattered remains of the asteroid, still drifting in a slowly expanding cloud of fine dust and debris. Somewhere behind that quiet, disciplined human fleet, an entire species had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment, hiding their true strength behind careful secrecy and patient restraint. She had come to Sol System, expecting to correct what she saw as a predecessor's failure of nerve. Instead, she found herself standing at the exact same crossroads Voss Adron had faced months earlier, forced to weigh Imperial pride against the plain, undeniable evidence of a species far more capable than anyone back home had ever imagined. And far across the solar system, hidden within secure command bunkers and quiet council chambers, Naomi Reyes and her fellow leaders watched the Cauldron fleet's hesitation with quiet, careful satisfaction, knowing that their patient decades of preparation had once again proven their worth, and that humanity's secret was, for now, still safely their own to control. Grand Marshal Kasari Vaughn gathered her senior officers in the strategy room of the Imperial Wrath, the memory of the shattered asteroid still fresh in everyone's mind. The mood in the room was tense, unlike anything most of these officers had experienced during their years of service in the Caldron military. "I want honest assessments," Kasari said, standing at the head of the table. "Not reassurances, not excuses. What are we truly facing here?" Her chief tactical officer, a grizzled veteran named Barrow Kess, spoke first. "Grand Marshal, based on the single demonstration we witnessed, their smaller vessels alone may match or exceed the firepower of our heavy cruisers. If their larger ships scale proportionally, Engaging their full fleet would be suicidal for a force our size. Their formation also suggests extensive combat training, added another officer, a tactical analyst named Sella Rowe. The way their patrol vessel moved, fired, and returned to formation showed discipline consistent with a fleet that trains constantly, not one that simply built weapons and hoped for the best. Kasari listened carefully, her jaw tight. She had built her entire career on decisive action, on never backing down from a fight once committed. But she had also built that career by knowing when a fight could not be won, and recognizing the difference between courage and recklessness. "There is something else, Grand Marshal," Dresk said quietly from his seat near the display. "The additional energy signatures we detected on the far side of the moon. I have analyzed them further. They suggest an additional fleet presence, separate from the 200 vessels already shown to us. We do not know the size of this second force, only that it exists and remains hidden." The room fell silent at this. If the 200 ships already visible represented only a portion of humanity's true naval strength, the scale of what remained hidden was impossible to calculate with any confidence. Kasari closed her eyes briefly, weighing everything she had heard against the fire of her own pride. She had traveled across 1,000 light-years to prove that a stronger commander would succeed where Vos Adron had failed. Instead, she found herself facing an enemy whose full strength remained an unsolved mystery, guarded by a demonstrated firepower that made her own fleet's advanced weaponry look almost primitive by comparison. "Prepare a formal withdrawal," Kasari said finally, her voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "But before we depart, I wish to speak with Admiral Reyes once more. Not to negotiate weakness, but to understand exactly what kind of adversary, or potential ally, we are truly facing." The officers exchanged glances, some relieved, some clearly disappointed that their commander had chosen restraint over confrontation. But none argued. The asteroid's destruction had spoken more clearly than any argument could have. Kasari returned to the bridge and opened the channel once more. Naomi Reyes appeared, her expression patient as always, though Kasari thought she detected the faintest hint of respect in the human admiral's eyes. Respect for a commander who had chosen wisdom over pride when it mattered most. "Admiral Reyes," Kasari said, "my fleet will withdraw from your system's inner boundary. However, I find myself with many questions that I suspect only your people can answer honestly." "I will answer what I can, Grand Marshal," Naomi said. "Ask your questions. How large is your true fleet? The full number, not merely what you have chosen to reveal to us." Naomi considered the question for a long moment before answering. "I cannot give you an exact figure, Grand Marshal, both because such information remains sensitive, and because our fleet continues to grow with each passing year. What I can tell you is that the 200 vessels shown to both you and Commander Voss represent our primary defense force, the ships we keep ready at all times for exactly this kind of encounter. There are other vessels, research ships, older models, support craft, that number considerably higher, though their combat value varies." "And your weapons technology," Kasari continued. "The demonstration your patrol vessel provided was considerable for a ship of its size. Where did such technology originate? Our records show no history of your species developing anything close to this level of capability before this encounter." Naomi's expression grew slightly more guarded. "That, Grand Marshal, is a longer story, one involving allies from beyond our own solar system who came to us seeking shelter many years ago. I do not believe this is the appropriate venue to share the full details, particularly not while our two civilizations remain strangers to one another, in every meaningful sense." Kasari nodded slowly, understanding the caution even if it frustrated her curiosity. "A reasonable position, Admiral. One more question then, and I will withdraw my fleet as promised. Why show us any of this at all? You could have remained hidden, allowed our scouts to continue believing your species primitive and undefended. Instead, you revealed enough to convince two separate commanders to withdraw peacefully. What do you hope to gain by ending this secrecy now, even partially?" Naomi was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. "Because secrecy has its limits, Grand Marshal. Eventually, someone would have discovered our fleet regardless of how carefully we hid it, and that discovery might have come under far worse circumstances than a diplomatic standoff over an unclaimed moon. Better, I believe, to reveal ourselves on our own terms, in a controlled manner, than to be discovered by accident during a moment of crisis, where miscommunication could lead to real bloodshed. Kasari found herself, somewhat unexpectedly, respecting the logic behind this human admiral's careful strategy. It was not so different from decisions she herself had made during her own long career, choosing controlled demonstrations of strength over reckless secrecy or premature aggression. "You are a careful commander, Admiral Reyes," Kasari said. "I did not expect to find such caution in a species my empire's records described as primitive only months ago." "Our records on your empire were equally incomplete until recently, Grand Marshal," Naomi replied. "Perhaps this encounter will serve as a lesson for both our civilizations, that assumptions made from a distance rarely capture the full truth of any people." Kasari allowed herself a small, tired smile, the first genuine expression of warmth she had shown throughout the entire encounter. "Perhaps so, Admiral. I will file my reports honestly, though I suspect the Senate will find them difficult to accept. There are those among my people who value pride over wisdom, and they will not easily accept that a species previously dismissed as primitive has bested 2 of our fleets through demonstration alone, without firing a single shot in true anger." "I understand that difficulty, Grand Marshal," Naomi said. "We faced similar resistance from our own leadership when this project began 30 years ago. Change of this magnitude is rarely welcomed without hesitation, regardless of species." "Then perhaps our peoples have more in common than either of us realized before today," Kasari said. "I will withdraw my fleet now, Admiral. I hope that when our civilizations meet again, it will be under better circumstances than these." "As do I, Grand Marshal," Naomi replied. "Safe travels." The channel closed, and Kasari ordered the withdrawal of her fleet, watching as her 12 warships and 3 heavy cruisers slowly turned away from the silver moon and the pale blue world it orbited. She stood at the viewport for a long time, watching Earth shrink into the darkness behind her, her mind heavy with the knowledge of what she had witnessed and the difficult reports she would soon have to file. Back within the secure council chambers beneath the mountain range on Earth, Director Elias Marsh and his fellow council members watched the departure of the Second Cauldron Fleet with cautious relief. 2 commanders, 2 withdrawals, Priya Anand said, studying the sensor readings confirming the fleet's departure. "But I doubt this will be the last we hear from the Cauldron Empire, Admiral Reyes. A Senate that sends 2 separate fleets to secure a single moon within the span of a few months will not simply give up after 2 failed attempts." "You are likely correct," Naomi said, joining the council in the chamber after concluding her conversation with Kasari. Grand Marshal Vaughn herself suggested as much. "There are those among the Cauldron leadership who value pride over caution, and they will not easily accept 2 peaceful withdrawals as the final word on this matter." "Then what do you recommend, Admiral?" Director Marsh asked. "I recommend we accelerate our own preparations," Naomi said. Both commanders were convinced, through demonstration alone, without a single shot fired in genuine conflict. But demonstrations only work so many times before an enemy decides to test their limits directly, rather than accept them at face value. "We have bought ourselves time, Director. Valuable time, but not indefinite safety." The council fell into careful discussion, weighing the risks of further exposure against the dangers of remaining hidden, while a foreign empire continued probing their defenses. Naomi listened to the debate with the patience of someone who had spent 30 years preparing for exactly this kind of uncertain future, understanding that the true test of humanity's secret fleet had not yet arrived, and that the coming months would determine whether the careful peace bought through 2 quiet withdrawals could hold, or whether the Cauldron Empire's wounded pride would eventually demand a much harsher reckoning. Far across the galaxy, within the grand halls of the Cauldron Senate, Kasari Vaughn prepared to deliver her report, knowing that her honest account of the encounter would likely spark fierce debate among a leadership unaccustomed to accepting defeat, even a peaceful and bloodless one, from a species they had so recently considered beneath their notice. Grand Marshal Kasari Vaughn stood before the full assembly of the Cauldron Senate, delivering her report with the same calm discipline she had shown during her encounter with Admiral Naomi Reyes months earlier. The Great Hall was filled with senators, military officials, and advisors, all listening intently as she described the moon of Sol's 3rd planet, the hidden fleet waiting behind it, and the single demonstration that had convinced her to withdraw without a single shot fired. When she finished speaking, silence hung over the chamber for a long moment before the arguments began. "You retreated," said Senator Aldrich Vane. a sharp-faced man known for his hardline positions on Imperial expansion. Twice, our fleets have retreated from this system. First under Commander Voss, now under your own command, Grand Marshal. Are we to simply accept that a species our own records described as primitive only a year ago has somehow humbled two of our finest commanders? I did not retreat out of fear, Senator, Kasari replied evenly. I retreated because the evidence before me made clear that any engagement would have resulted in the needless destruction of my entire fleet, with no reasonable chance of achieving our objective. I do not consider that cowardice. I consider it the responsible use of the resources and lives placed under my command. And what of the Empire's reputation? Vane pressed. Word of this encounter has already begun spreading, Grand Marshal, despite our best efforts at containment. The Skarn Collective will hear of this eventually, if they have not already. What message do we send to our enemies when we allow a single unknown species to turn away two separate fleets without resistance? Before Kasari could respond, another voice spoke from across the chamber. It belonged to Senator Yelena Thren, an older woman known for her careful, measured approach to imperial policy. Perhaps the message we send, Senator Vane, is one of wisdom rather than weakness, Thren said. Our empire has expanded for centuries by conquering worlds less advanced than our own. We have rarely, if ever, encountered a species that met us as equals, let alone one that may exceed our capabilities in certain areas. I would remind this chamber that reckless pride has ended empires before ours, when leaders refused to acknowledge new realities simply because those realities challenged old assumptions. The debate continued for hours, senators arguing fiercely over whether to prepare a third, far larger fleet to finally subdue this newly discovered human civilization, or whether to pursue the diplomatic path that both Voss Adran and Kasari Vaughn had recommended, following their respective encounters. In the end, it was Kasari herself who offered the argument that finally shifted the balance of the debate. Consider this, honored senators, she said, standing once more before the assembly. We do not yet know the true size of humanity's fleet, nor the full extent of their technology. What we do know is that two separate commanders, each with different fleet strengths and different levels of caution, arrived at the exact same conclusion when faced with the evidence. I ask this chamber to consider what that consistency truly means. It is not the result of two commanders' personal weaknesses. It is the result of an honest, careful assessment of an enemy whose true strength remains unknown, but whose demonstrated capability was more than sufficient to give any reasonable commander serious pause. She paused, letting her words settle over the chamber before continuing. I propose we do what Commander Voss originally suggested months ago, before this chamber dismissed his recommendation as excessive caution. We open formal diplomatic contact with humanity, not as conquerors demanding submission, but as a civilization seeking to understand a newly discovered power on equal terms. If they prove to be reasonable, as their Admiral Reyes certainly seemed to be during our encounter, we may find in them a valuable ally rather than a costly enemy. And if diplomacy fails, we will have lost nothing but time, while gaining considerably more knowledge of their true strength than we currently possess. The chamber fell into thoughtful silence, and eventually, after further debate, the Senate voted, narrowly but decisively, to pursue formal diplomatic contact with Earth, rather than risk a third military expedition. Word of this decision eventually reached the secure council chambers beneath the mountain range on Earth, delivered through careful intelligence channels that Naomi Reyes and her colleagues had cultivated over the years. Director Elias Marsh read the intercepted reports with a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. The Cauldron Senate has voted for diplomacy, Marsh announced to the assembled council. It seems Grand Marshal Vaughn's report, combined with Commander Voss's earlier recommendation, carried enough weight to overcome the Empire's more aggressive factions, at least for now. A fragile peace, but a peace nonetheless, Naomi said, studying the report carefully. This does not mean the danger has passed entirely. Empires that value strength above all else rarely abandon that value permanently, even after a setback such as this one. But it does buy us something valuable. Time to continue growing, time to prepare for whatever comes next, and perhaps, time to build a genuine relationship with a civilization that clearly possesses far more knowledge of the wider galaxy than we currently do. What do you recommend going forward, Admiral? Priya Anand asked. Naomi considered the question carefully before answering. I recommend we accept their offer of formal contact, cautiously and on our own terms. We reveal what is necessary to establish honest diplomatic relations, but we continue to hold back the true extent of our capabilities, just as we have done throughout this entire encounter. Trust, when dealing with an empire whose history includes centuries of conquest, must be earned slowly, through consistent and careful action, not given freely simply because a single vote in their Senate happened to favor caution over aggression. The Council agreed, and over the following months, careful diplomatic exchanges began between Earth's quiet leadership and representatives of the Cauldron Empire. Commander Voss Adran, whose original recommendation had ultimately shaped the Empire's final decision, was chosen to lead the first official diplomatic delegation to Earth, a fitting turn of events for the commander, whose caution had begun this entire chain of events months earlier. When Voss's shuttle finally landed at a secure facility on Earth's surface, escorted carefully by human fleet vessels the entire way, he stepped out to find Naomi Reyes, waiting to greet him personally, her expression calm but genuinely curious, much as it had been during their very first conversation, months earlier above the silver moon. "Commander Voss," she said, extending a hand in a gesture she had learned was customary among many species across the galaxy for greeting new acquaintances. "Welcome to Earth. I believe this is the first time a representative of your empire has set foot on our world." Voss took her hand carefully, studying the world around him, the blue sky, the green growing things, the simple beauty of a planet that had spent 30 years quietly preparing to defend itself against exactly the kind of visit he was now making. "Thank you for the welcome, Admiral," he said. "I confess, I did not expect to find myself standing here, given how our first meeting unfolded above your moon." "Neither did I, Commander," Naomi admitted, a small smile crossing her face. "But I am glad it has led to this, instead of something far worse. Shall we begin building something better between our two peoples?" Voss looked out over the unfamiliar landscape, thinking of the long journey that had brought him here, from a routine mission expecting easy conquest, to a moment of genuine, cautious partnership between two civilizations who had very nearly become enemies through simple misunderstanding and outdated assumptions. "Yes, Admiral," he said. "I believe we shall." And so began a new chapter in humanity's quiet history, one where the secret fleet that had waited patiently on the far side of the moon for 30 long years finally stepped out from the shadows, not as conquerors or as victims, but as equals, ready to take their place among the wider community of civilizations scattered across the stars. The galaxy, humanity had proven through patience, preparation, and careful restraint, was far more complicated than any single empire's assumptions could ever fully capture, and Earth, quiet and unassuming as it appeared from a distance, had earned its place within that complicated and dangerous universe through decades of careful, hidden strength. The Cauldron Empire would go on to become, in time, one of humanity's most valuable allies among the stars, a relationship built not on conquest or submission, but on the mutual respect earned during those tense, quiet days above a silver moon, when two civilizations first learned that appearances, however convincing from a distance, rarely told the whole story of any world or any people.